This event took place quite a few years ago, so unfortunately, I don't remember every single detail, but I recall nearly all of it. This happened when I was around 4 or 5 years old, on an Easter Sunday that began like many others in my family. We always gathered at my grandmother's house to celebrate holidays and birthdays. The excitement of these family gatherings was something I looked forward to with childlike glee, and this particular Easter Sunday was no exception. My mother and I started our hour-long trip to Grandma's house early in the morning. She preferred to live away from all the city commotion, which explained the long drive through winding country roads. The scenery was always breathtaking, with fields of blooming wildflowers and trees just starting to show their spring leaves. The sky was a clear, crisp blue, and the air had that fresh, invigorating scent of new beginnings that spring often brings. As we drove, I could feel the anticipation building up inside me. The Easter basket on the seat next to me was filled with colorful eggs and candy, and I couldn't wait to show it off to my cousins. My mother, always a careful driver, kept a steady pace, humming along to the tunes on the radio. We were probably around 20 minutes away from our destination when she noticed that the gas gauge was hovering near empty. With a calmness that always reassured me, she decided to pull into a nearby gas station to fill up. The gas station we stopped at was old, almost rustic looking, with a few customers inside. It was painted red and white, with festive decorations outside and lots of Easter stickers on the 2 large glass windows that flanked the door. The place had a quaint charm to it, like a relic from a simpler time. The sight of the colorful decorations made me smile, adding to the joyful spirit of the day. My mom, having taught me well about the dangers of talking to strangers and the importance of staying put, trusted me enough to leave me in the car alone as she went inside briefly to pay for the gas. She leaned in, her eyes meeting mine with a seriousness that I now recognize as deep maternal love and concern. "I'll be right back, honey. Remember, don't talk to strangers or open the car doors for anyone but me." It was a pleasant day, so the windows in the car were down to let in the fresh breeze instead of using the AC. I loved feeling the wind in my hair and listening to the sounds of the world outside. As I waited for my mom, I busied myself by adjusting the colorful paper clippings in my Easter basket, arranging them just so, the way kids often do when they're both excited and a little bored. Then, I looked out of the back seat window, my eyes wandering over the scene outside. That's when I saw him. A tall, older man, maybe around 30 years old, was approaching my window. He had a scruffy beard and wore a faded baseball cap. There was something about him that made me feel uneasy, even before he spoke. He crouched down slightly, bringing his face closer to my window, and with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he said, "Hi there. What's your name?" In that instant, all of my mom's warnings about strangers came rushing back to me. My heart started to beat faster, but I remembered what she had told me. "My mom says I shouldn't speak to strangers," I replied, my voice a mixture of defiance and fear. The man's smile widened, but it still seemed off. "Well, we can be friends then. My name's Charlie, and now that you know my name, I guess I'm not a stranger anymore, huh?" At my young age, his logic seemed sound. I didn't yet understand that knowing someone's name didn't mean they weren't a stranger. We exchanged a few words, though I don't remember exactly what was said. I do recall him complimenting my Easter basket, which made me feel proud and uneasy at the same time. The sick feeling in my stomach grew stronger, but I couldn't quite understand why. Something about the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, made me feel wrong inside. Just then, as if sensing the danger from inside the gas station, my mom emerged. I saw her freeze for a split second when she noticed the man near our car, her expression changing from calm to one of fierce protectiveness. She started walking quickly towards us, her eyes locked onto the man with a look that could only be described as a warning. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice strong and unwavering. The man seemed to panic at her approach. He yanked at my door handle violently, but it was locked. He then reached through the open window, his rough hand grabbing my wrist and pulling hard, trying to drag me out of the car. Terror washed over me as I instinctively pulled back, my small hands gripping the seat, my body fighting against his force. My screams filled the car, high-pitched and desperate. My mom broke into a run, covering the distance between her and the car in what felt like an eternity, but was probably just a few seconds. The man let go of me abruptly, realizing he was outmatched. He took off running across the parking lot, disappearing around the corner of the gas station. Mom reached the car, flung open the door, and pulled me into an almost painful bear hug. Her arms wrapped around me with such strength that I could feel her heart pounding against my chest. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" she asked over and over, her voice trembling with fear and relief. She inspected me closely, her hands gently probing the spot on my wrist where he had grabbed me. There was a slight bruise and some redness, but other than that, I was physically unharmed. The reality of what had just happened hit me like a tidal wave, and I started to cry, clutching onto my mom as if letting go would make the world unsafe again. She held me tight, her soothing words barely audible over my sobs. "It's okay, you're safe now. I've got you. He can't hurt you." I don't remember much after that, but I recently asked my mom about it, and she filled in the gaps. She had called the police immediately after the man ran off. She gave them a detailed description of him, but to our knowledge, he was never caught. To this day, she says it was the most frightening moment of her life, and that if she had gotten there any later and come back to an empty car, she wouldn't have been able to live with herself. That day left an indelible mark on both of us. For my mom, it reinforced the vigilance and protectiveness she already felt as a parent. For me, it was an early, harsh lesson in the dangers that can lurk in seemingly ordinary situations. It taught me to trust my instincts, to be wary of those who seek to exploit a child's innocence. It also taught me about the fierce, unyielding love of a mother who would do anything to protect her child. As I grew older, the memory of that day faded somewhat, but the lesson remained. I often think back to that Easter Sunday, not just as a day of near tragedy, but also as a testament to my mother's strength and love. It's a reminder that even in the most terrifying moments, the bonds of family and the instincts of a protective parent can make all the difference. The details of that day, though somewhat hazy now, still come back to me in flashes. The old gas station, the man's unsettling smile, my mother's fierce protectiveness. They are fragments of a story that shaped my understanding of the world, of safety, and of love. It's a story I will one day tell my own children, not to scare them, but to teach them about vigilance, about trusting their instincts, and about the lengths a parent will go to keep them safe. Working inside a pizzeria nestled in a 24-hour gas station might not sound glamorous to most, but for me, it was a new chapter, an adventure. The pizzeria was a recent addition, about 3 months old, and its small size meant we shared space with the gas station cashiers. The freezer, refrigerator, and back room were communal areas, which made for interesting dynamics and interactions. My journey with the pizzeria began with a sense of excitement and curiosity. The team was small, just 3 college-age girls including myself, which created a tight-knit, almost familial atmosphere. The first few days were a breeze. The gas station cashier I often worked with, an older man named Raj, was kind and generous. Raj, in his early to mid-40s, had a thick accent and spoke English haltingly. He was tall, probably about 6'5", towering over us girls by at least 1.5 feet. One of the other cashiers mentioned that Raj was a very devout man, which I thought was neat at the time. Little did I know how unsettling things would become. On my first shift, Raj frequently offered me free food and drinks from the soda fountain. He had a welcoming smile and a fatherly demeanor, which put me at ease. I would often take these freebies home, grateful for the small perks of the job. The gas station itself had a certain charm, despite its age. The walls were adorned with advertisements and promotional posters, and the constant hum of the refrigerators and the occasional ding of the door chime became the soundtrack to my shifts. It was a Saturday night, a few weeks into my job, when things started to feel off. The gas station was quiet, with only a few late-night customers trickling in. Raj and I were the only ones working. The silence between us stretched, becoming almost palpable. Then, out of nowhere, Raj asked me to come to his house for a party. I was taken aback. It was an unusual request, and I felt a pang of discomfort. Politely, I declined, trying to keep my tone light and casual. Raj's face fell, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. He didn't say much else that night, but his demeanor shifted subtly, becoming more intense. The next day, Raj's behavior became more pronounced. "I want to get to know you," he would say repeatedly throughout the day. His persistence was unnerving. At one point, he wrote down his phone number and awkwardly stuffed it into my backpack when I wasn't looking. When I found the note later, my heart sank. I didn't know how to handle this growing discomfort. As I was leaving that night, I smiled politely and told Raj, "Sorry, I'm very busy." I didn't stick around to talk, feeling the weight of his gaze as I walked out. Things escalated from there. Every few days, he would ask me out for coffee or offer to buy me dinner. Each time, I declined, citing busyness. Raj's frustration grew with every rejection. His persistence scared me, but I didn't feel safe outright telling him I wasn't interested. A small, gnawing fear at the back of my mind warned me that he might hurt me if I did. This pattern continued for about a month. By then, I was avoiding all contact with Raj. When we were in the same room, I was completely tense, refusing to engage. I started consistently locking the door to the pizzeria, fearing he would try to come in. He attempted to wander in once or twice, but when he found the door locked, his anger was palpable. I handed him whatever he needed over the counter, avoiding his gaze. I rode a motorcycle, which meant there was no locking myself in a car when I left at midnight. Raj knew this. One night, about 2 months into my job, I was getting ready to leave. Raj had already left, but the tension lingered. The parking lot was eerily empty, and the lack of cameras added to my unease. Ever since I started reading "Let's Not Meet" stories online, I always carried a knife on me, no exceptions. That night, like most nights, I had my knife open in my pocket with my hand on it. As I scanned the parking lot, I noticed a car parked a few spaces away. I wasn't sure if it was his, but I wasn't taking any chances. I laughed at myself for being so paranoid. I started my bike, letting it warm up. Just then, the door to the car opened. My heart raced. Raj stepped out, his presence sending me into full fear mode. I frantically shoved on my helmet, my hands trembling. "Hey!" he called out, his voice low and unsettling. I didn't respond. I just started rolling my motorcycle out of the parking space, hoping to make a quick escape. Raj moved closer, standing a foot or so in front of me. "Give me a kiss," he said, his tone menacing. His hand reached out, gripping my handlebar. That was it for me. I reached for my pocket, and he took a startled step back, probably thinking I had pepper spray. In that moment, my fight or flight response kicked in, and I tore out of the parking lot, his angry shouts fading behind me. "Where are you going?" he yelled, his voice filled with fury. I didn't look back. I rationalized that since he hadn't actually touched me, there was no point in reporting it. Besides, I doubted my foreign bosses would side with me over him. After that night, Raj stopped talking to me completely. The awkward advances ceased, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. However, the relief was short-lived. A few days ago, my coworker, Emily, was alone with Raj. She went into the refrigerator to get some milk, and he followed her. With her back turned, he grabbed her from behind, forcibly groping and kissing her. She was too scared to fight back, too shocked to scream. Emily didn't want to talk about it much, and I didn't press her for details. She was clearly traumatized, and I felt a crushing guilt. If I had said something, maybe this wouldn't have happened to her. Raj was immediately fired and was set to return to Iran within the week. The atmosphere in the gas station shifted. The other cashiers were supportive, but there was an underlying tension, a shared unease that hung in the air. I spent many sleepless nights thinking about what had happened. I wished I had been braver, had spoken up sooner, but the fear of retaliation had silenced me, just as it had silenced Emily. The sense of powerlessness was overwhelming. I reached out to friends for advice, hoping to find some way to help Emily and to cope with my own guilt. In the end, I realized that the most important thing was to support Emily and ensure that the workplace was safer for everyone. I spoke with my bosses, explaining the situation in as much detail as I could. They were horrified and assured me that measures would be put in place to prevent such incidents in the future. Security cameras were installed, and a new policy was implemented to ensure no one worked alone at night. As I reflect on this experience, I'm reminded of the importance of vigilance and the power of speaking out. It's easy to feel isolated and scared in such situations, but there is strength in numbers and in taking action. I learned that protecting oneself isn't just about carrying a knife or locking doors. It's also about creating a safe environment and standing up against harassment. Today, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm determined to be more vocal, to protect myself and others from similar situations. And while the memory of those frightening encounters with Raj still lingers, it no longer holds power over me. Instead, it serves as a reminder of my resilience and the importance of community and support. Emily and I grew closer after the incident. We leaned on each other, finding strength in our shared experiences. The gas station, once a place of unease, became a symbol of our newfound courage. We worked together to foster a supportive and safe environment, encouraging our coworkers to speak up and stand together. Life at the pizzeria continues, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The bond between us girls strengthened, and we became more than just coworkers. We became a support system, a family of sorts. The pizzeria, though small and nestled in a corner of the gas station, became a place of camaraderie and resilience. Looking back, I see that the fear and tension were temporary, but the lessons learned and the strength gained are lasting. I'm proud of how far we've come and grateful for the support and solidarity that emerged from a dark time. The journey wasn't easy, but it was transformative, shaping us into stronger, more aware individuals. So here's to the small pizzeria in the 24-hour gas station, a place where challenges were faced and overcome, where fear was transformed into strength, and where a community of brave individuals continues to thrive, watchful and unwavering in their commitment to safety and support. This happened to me about 9 or 10 years ago, but I will never forget it. At the time, I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was a competitive softball player, and my team was nationally ranked. We traveled all over the United States to play in tournaments, which resulted in long car rides, sometimes through the night. One night in particular stands out in my memory. It was around midnight, and we were on our way to a tournament. I had been sleeping in the car when we stopped at a gas station for a bathroom break. My teammate, who was also around 11 or 12, and I decided to stay in the car while our moms went inside because we didn't really have to go. It was a quiet night, and the gas station was dimly lit by a few flickering lights. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees nearby. The sky was a deep, velvety black, dotted with twinkling stars. The station itself had an old-fashioned feel, with faded signs and a slightly run-down appearance. It was the kind of place that felt like it belonged in a different era, a relic of simpler times. A few moments after our moms had left, locking us in the car, I noticed another vehicle in the parking lot. It was a few spaces over and the only other car at the station. It was an older model sedan, with peeling paint and a dent on the passenger side door. Inside, I saw a middle-aged man and a little girl who appeared to be about 6 or 7 years old. The girl looked strikingly similar to the man, so I assumed she was his daughter. The little girl caught my eye and smiled at me. Her smile was sweet, and for a moment, it warmed my heart. I smiled back and waved, thinking she was an adorable little girl. She said something to the man, and he looked at me and smiled too. His smile, however, felt different, forced, perhaps a bit too eager. I went back to minding my own business as the man went into the store, leaving his daughter in the car. When I glanced back at the little girl, her expression had changed. She was looking at me with wide, frightened eyes. My heart skipped a beat. She started hitting the windows and motioning for me to come over to the car. Instantly, my adrenaline kicked into overdrive. This girl was acting like she desperately needed my help. My mind raced with possibilities. What if this man had kidnapped her? What if she was in real danger and needed me to save her? My initial thought had been that he was her father, but now I wasn't so sure. The fear in her eyes was genuine, and it made my stomach churn. I turned to my friend, who had gone back to sleep, and tried to wake her up. She groggily shot me a dirty look and rolled over, clearly not grasping the gravity of the situation. Turning back to the little girl, I was about to get out of the car and go talk to her when I saw something that made my blood run cold. She had made eye contact with the man inside the store. He was standing near the window, watching us. He smiled at her and nodded, as if giving her a signal. She smiled back at him and then turned to me, resuming her frantic motions for me to come over. That exchange between the girl and the man sent chills down my spine. It seemed orchestrated, like she was acting under his direction. I decided then and there that I was not getting out of the car. I would tell my mom about it when she got back, but there was no way I was going to put myself in potential danger. My heart was pounding as I waited for my mom to return. I kept a close eye on the man, who had now started to walk back towards his car. He hadn't bought anything and had been standing in the store, watching the whole time. When he got into the car, they started having a conversation, occasionally glancing at me. The little girl shrugged, and he patted her on the shoulder before starting the engine. As they began to pull out of the parking lot, I glanced at the girl one last time. She was looking right at me with a huge smile on her face, a smile that was now more unsettling than sweet. It sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't tell my mom about it when she returned to the car because I was still so confused and shocked by what had just happened. For a little while, I didn't tell anyone because I felt guilty that I hadn't done anything when that girl could have actually been in trouble. Over the next few days, the incident kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the man was using his daughter to try and lure me to their car by making me believe she was in trouble. Who knows what would have happened next? My guess is he would have run out from his watching spot, grabbed me, and driven off. The whole situation felt so rehearsed, so calculated. I was certain this wasn't the first time they had done this. Weeks passed, and I eventually told my mom about the incident. She was horrified and grateful that I hadn't gotten out of the car. She explained to me that I had done the right thing by staying put, and that sometimes our instincts are there to protect us. She called the police and reported the incident, but without more information, there wasn't much they could do. They did, however, advise us to always be cautious and never let our guard down, especially in unfamiliar places. This experience left a lasting impression on me. It was a harsh lesson in the realities of the world, a reminder that not everyone has good intentions. It taught me to trust my instincts, to be aware of my surroundings, and to always prioritize my safety. It also made me more empathetic towards others, understanding that sometimes people are in situations that aren't immediately obvious to an outsider. In the years that followed, I often wondered what became of that little girl. I hoped she was safe, that someone had intervened and helped her out of whatever situation she was in. But deep down, I knew that might not be the case. The thought haunted me, a reminder of how fragile and vulnerable we can be, especially as children. As I grew older, I became more involved in advocating for child safety and awareness. I volunteered at local shelters and participated in community programs aimed at educating kids about the dangers they might face. I shared my story with them, hoping that it would help them recognize and avoid potentially dangerous situations. The memory of that night at the gas station never faded completely, but it transformed from a source of fear into a catalyst for change. It drove me to be more proactive, more vigilant, and more determined to make a difference. It was a turning point in my life, a moment that shaped who I am today. Now, whenever I see a child who looks frightened or out of place, I make sure to pay attention. I trust my instincts, and if something feels off, I don't hesitate to act. Because sometimes, a simple act of vigilance can make all the difference. And sometimes, trusting your gut can save a life. Winter in Northern California has its own kind of chill, a damp cold that seeps into your bones and makes you long for the warmth of summer. I never really appreciated just how cold it could get until the winter of 2017. It was a rough time for me. I had totaled my car after hydroplaning into a ditch during a particularly nasty storm, and I was left without a vehicle. With my job at the local gas station a mile and a half from my apartment, I decided to make the best of a bad situation and walk to work. I figured it would be good exercise, and besides, I needed the money from my job to buy a new car. I had the opening shift at the gas station, which meant I had to be there by 5 a.m. To make it on time, I had to start my commute at around 4:30 a.m. The road I walked on was paved and fairly well trafficked during the day, but at that hour, it was pitch black and eerily silent. There were no street lights, and the only light came from my powerful flood flashlight, which I carried to pierce the darkness. One particularly cold morning, I set out as usual, my breath visible in the frosty air. The sky was still dark, and the stars were faintly visible through the canopy of clouds. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the frosty pavement and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As I walked, I found myself thinking about the day ahead, planning my tasks at the gas station and looking forward to the end of my shift. About half a mile into my walk, I reached a stretch of road flanked by a dense forest. This part of the walk always made me a little uneasy. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches forming a dark, tangled canopy overhead. There were no houses nearby, just miles of forest that seemed to swallow all sound. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and continued on, the beam cutting through the shadows. As I walked, I started to hear a rustling sound in the bushes to my left. My heart rate quickened, and I shone my light in the direction of the noise. At first, I saw nothing but dark, twisted branches and underbrush. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. I swung the light back and just about jumped out of my skin when a deer emerged from the bushes, its eyes reflecting the light in an eerie glow. It paused for a moment, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, before darting across the road and disappearing into the woods on the other side. I let out a nervous laugh, scolding myself for being so jumpy. It was just a deer, nothing to worry about. I took a deep breath and continued walking, trying to shake off the lingering unease. But as I walked, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few steps. Another half-mile down the road, the feeling of being watched intensified. This time, it wasn't just a fleeting sensation. It was a cold, gnawing dread that settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but every instinct in my body was telling me that something was wrong. I swung my flashlight around, sweeping the beam through the trees and bushes. As the light passed over a thick cluster of bushes about 50 feet behind me, I saw it. A figure, crouched and motionless, partially hidden by the foliage. At first, I thought it was a homeless person or maybe a hunter, but as I shined the light directly on it, I realized with a jolt of terror that it was something else entirely. The creature was naked, with pale, almost translucent skin that seemed to glow in the light. Its limbs were unnaturally long and thin, ending in sharp, black claws. It was crouched low, its back to me, but I could see its head slowly turning in my direction. When it turned fully, I saw its eyes. They were large, reflective, and glowed like an animal's eyes caught in the headlights. But there was nothing human about them. For a moment, I was paralyzed with fear. The creature stared at me with those glowing eyes, and I felt a wave of cold, primal terror wash over me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but there was no rational explanation. It was like something out of a nightmare. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, my survival instincts kicked in. I turned and bolted down the road, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, but I could hear something behind me, a soft, almost rhythmic thudding that made my blood run cold. I pushed myself to run faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I prayed for some sign of civilization. Just when I thought my lungs would burst, I saw headlights in the distance. A car was approaching, its beams cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. I kept running, waving my arms frantically to get the driver's attention. The car slowed down as it passed me, and I saw the driver, a middle-aged man, give me a concerned look before driving on. As the car's taillights disappeared around a bend, I realized the sound behind me had stopped. I slowed to a jog, then to a walk, glancing nervously over my shoulder. There was no sign of the creature, but I wasn't taking any chances. I kept moving, my flashlight beam dancing wildly as I scanned the trees for any sign of movement. By the time I reached the gas station, I was drenched in sweat and gasping for air. I stumbled through the door, and my coworker, Mike, looked up from behind the counter with a start. "Jesus, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, his eyes widening in alarm. I tried to catch my breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. I think I did. There was something out there, Mike. It wasn't human. Mike's expression changed from concern to something else, recognition. You saw it too? He asked quietly. I nodded, my hands still shaking. What the hell was that thing? Mike sighed and glanced around the empty store before leaning in closer. You're not the first to see it. A few weeks ago, another coworker saw the same thing, described it exactly like you did. Pale skin, long limbs, glowing eyes. We've been trying to keep it quiet, but what? I pressed, feeling a new wave of fear wash over me. But it's not the first time it's happened. There have been stories around here for years. People seeing things in the woods, disappearing without a trace. We thought they were just old legends, but now I'm not so sure. I felt a chill run down my spine as Mike's words sank in. The creature I had seen wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it had been haunting these woods for a long time. That day at work was a blur. I went through the motions, my mind replaying the morning's events over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing eyes staring back at me. By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I called an Uber to take me home, not willing to risk another encounter with the creature. As I waited for the car to arrive, I stared out at the darkening sky, my mind racing with questions. What was that thing? Why was it here? And most importantly, how could I stay safe? The ride home was silent, the driver sensing my need for quiet. When I finally walked through the door of my apartment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was safe, at least for now, but I knew I couldn't keep walking to work in the dark. From that day on, I made sure to arrange rides or take public transportation. I wasn't going to take any chances. The memory of that morning stayed with me, a constant reminder of the unknown lurking in the shadows. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings, and I never set foot on that dark, lonely road again. In the weeks that followed, I tried to learn more about the creature. I talked to locals, visited the library, and scoured the internet for any information. What I found was a mix of folklore and first-hand accounts, stories of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances. Some called it a skinwalker, others a wendigo. Whatever it was, it seemed to thrive in the darkness, preying on those who ventured too close to its territory. One story, in particular, caught my attention. It was an old legend, passed down through generations, about a creature that lived in the forest, hunting at night. The story described it as a once human entity, cursed and transformed into a monstrous being. It was said to be able to mimic human voices, luring its victims into the woods. The description matched what I had seen, down to the glowing eyes and clawed fingers. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that the creature was real. It wasn't just a figment of my imagination or a product of my fear. It was a living, breathing nightmare, lurking just beyond the edge of the known world. Despite the fear, there was a part of me that was fascinated. The same curiosity that had drawn me to the paranormal now urged me to uncover the truth. I began to document my experiences, writing down everything I could remember about that morning. I interviewed others who had seen the creature, piecing together their stories to form a clearer picture. Through my research, I learned about the local wildlife and the forest's history. The area had always been wild and untamed, home to various animals and plants. But there were also stories of strange occurrences going back centuries. People spoke of ghostly apparitions, mysterious lights, and unexplained noises. The forest seemed to hold a dark secret, one that had been hidden for generations. I reached out to a few experts, hoping to get their take on what I had seen. Most were skeptical, dismissing the sightings as hoaxes or misidentifications. But a few took me seriously, offering insights and theories. One suggested that the creature could be an undiscovered species, living in the remote parts of the forest. Another believed it could be a manifestation of collective fear, a psychological phenomenon that had taken on a physical form. Despite the differing opinions, one thing was clear. There were no easy answers. The creature remained a mystery, a shadow in the dark that defied explanation. But I wasn't ready to give up. I continued my search, driven by a need to understand. My journey led me to places I never expected, meeting people with their own tales of the supernatural. Some shared my passion, while others were reluctant to talk. But each story added a piece to the puzzle, bringing me closer to the truth. Through it all, I never forgot the fear I had felt that morning. It was a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. But it also fueled my determination, pushing me to uncover the secrets of the forest. In the end, the creature became more than just a nightmare. It was a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that there were still mysteries in the world waiting to be discovered. And as long as there were questions, I would keep searching for answers. So, here I am, still on my quest, driven by a curiosity that refuses to be quenched. The road to work may have been cold and dark, but it led me to a journey of discovery, one that has changed my life forever. And who knows what other secrets lie in wait, just beyond the edge of the light. All I know is that I'll keep looking, keep searching for the truth. Because in the end, it's the journey that matters, the thrill of the unknown, and the hope that one day I'll find the answers I seek.